A group of progressive young people want to gentrify Harlow, Texas into a hipster haven. Unfortunately for them, Leatherface calls Harlow home, and as we all know, he doesn't take kindly to trespassers. The buzz is back. It's been 50 years since Sally Hardesty, her brother Franklin, and their friends ran afoul of the Sawyer clan. But the legacy of Leatherface lives on, as we're privy to early on in this movie. Leatherface's exploits have become fodder for true crime documentaries. True crime documentaries that are narrated by John Larroquette. So what's Leatherface been up to for the last half-century? He's been living quietly, peacefully, probably collecting stamps, watching daytime television, and gardening. I bet Leatherface would have made one hell of a gardener. And Leatherface would have likely lived out the rest of his years in peace, had a group of young entrepreneurs not saw money in the prospect of turning Harlow into Little Austin. They're smug, self-righteous, and push a little too hard, causing the death of someone close to Leatherface, which causes Leatherface to go all Charles Bronson on him. So much had already been said about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022, long before it saw the light of day. There were issues with the original directors, which saw them leave the film during the first week of production. The movie was initially slated for a theatrical release, but was sold to Netflix following disastrous test screenings, the feedback from which then leaked online. And very poor feedback it was. Expectations for the film were not the highest. Now, if you're familiar with my channel, you probably know that the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is my all-time favorite horror film. And honestly, it didn't need sequels. And I say that with nothing but love for parts 2, 3, and yes, even the next generation. But the original Chainsaw is not that kind of horror movie. Interpret that however you will. Because of this, the series has seen its fair share of retcons, i.e., failures to relaunch. This Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the 8th sequel in the series, and yet another retcon. And I had an absolute blast with it. First off, the kills in this movie are insane. This is easily one of the most violent and gory films in the series. Leatherface may be approaching 70, but he ain't lost a step when it comes to swinging a sledgehammer or a chainsaw. And that bus massacre scene that we got a taste of in the trailer, so good. The blood and gore effects are a combination of practical and CGI. Some of the CGI effects were quite noticeable, but honestly, I thought they did a good job of accentuating the practical with the CGI without it being too obvious. But as bloody and gory as this movie is, it never lost its fun factor. It's not the dour, grungy, nihilistic sort of violence from the remake in the beginning. This movie has a sense of humor and irony that shines through all the blood and entrails. And make no mistake, Leatherface is the hero of this movie. Leatherface here, much like in the original film, is thrust unwillingly into a position where he's forced to defend his home, and on top of that, seek vengeance against those responsible for the death of a loved one. There's a short but touching moment where Leatherface shows grief for this lost loved one. This is followed by an empowering and exciting moment where Leatherface is reintroduced to an old friend of his chainsaw. I felt absolutely nothing for most of the main characters. I would go so far as to say the filmmakers here intended for you to side with Leatherface and root for him to slaughter them all. Only one character has anything in the way of a backstory, and that backstory involves a gun-related tragedy. I didn't mind her honestly, but I'm kinda on the fence about whether or not her backstory was needed or not. I mean, it gives a reason for the anti-gun thing, but that's not really an agenda that's forced down our throats. If anything, if there were any agenda stuff in the movie, I have a feeling that it was either scrapped and reshot or ended up on the editing room floor altogether. I've heard people call this movie woke. If anything, it felt anti-woke to me. And the woke characters here get freaking annihilated. They're anti-gun, but they get saved on more than one occasion by somebody with a gun. When Leatherface is threatened with cancellation, he cancels them permanently. And Leatherface doesn't care about skin color or orientation. He is an equal opportunity mass murderer. Wait, is Leatherface woke? I like this iteration of Leatherface. He's big, he's mean, and he's pissed. He's also smarter, more cunning, and vindictive. He's actually a pretty scary character here. He does some rather non-Leatherface things in the film that I'm sure some will have issue with, such as the amount of damage he can withstand without, dying. But that didn't bother me very much. Taking a page from Halloween 2018, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 brings Sally Hardesty back into the picture. But Sally really didn't need to be here. There's another armed character in the film who's actually likable, that could have done all of the same things that she does, and it would have benefited the movie just as much, if not more. There is one interesting Sally moment though. The execution is a bit off, but there's a moment where Sally confronts Leatherface. And Leatherface is just like, "Who are you?" He had haunted her for the last half century, but to him, she was a stranger. I loved that. I also loved the ending. So brutal, but humorous in a pitch black kind of way. And stick around until after the credits. Overall, I had a blast with Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. It's a fast and furious ride that's soaked in blood, caked in gore, and loaded with great Leatherface moments that firmly reestablish his place on the Mount Rushmore of horror icons. It certainly won't be for everyone. As a matter of fact, I can see this movie dividing horror fans into two camps: those who loved it and will defend it passionately, and those who hated it and will hate it passionately. Personally, I'm on the side of loving Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022, and I highly recommend it. Let me know your thoughts on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 down in the comments section below. And while you're down there, let me know where you think it ranks among the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. If you like this video, please leave it a thumbs up and share it on social media. If you're not following me on social media, those links are in the description. As always, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Take care, and until next time, peace. Thank you to all my patrons and channel members. I appreciate your generosity and support of my channel. Become a patron today and have a say in what content appears on my channel. Join me for monthly live streams and much more. Become a channel member today and get access to exclusive badges and emotes to use when I stream. Both those links are in the description. Say hello to the internet, Jeremy.
Hello to the internet.